Hi, my name is Ann Sermons Gillis, and I'm Vice President of the Theosophical Order of Service. I'm interviewing people that are theosophists that we want to remember a long time from now. And so I'm very honored today to have with me Pablo Sender. Welcome, Pablo.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yay. Well, I am not going to say a lot about you. I will say that you are a national speaker and you also speak in other countries as well. And you're the author of two books. And maybe you'll tell us about those a little bit later in the interview. But we're going to hear everything from you. We're going to start in the very beginning. And I'm going to ask you, where were you born?
I was born in Argentina, in the capital city in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires. Okay. And so when did you come to the United States?
I came here in 2007. I grew up in Argentina. Then my parents moved to a smaller city where I went to college. Then I moved to another city. I did my PhD. And when I finished that, I moved to India, to Adyar, the international headquarters. I stayed there for a couple of years. And then when I was in Adyar, I was invited to come to the US. And then, so I came in 2007 and then I stayed.
So how did you get from you had a PhD in biology, correct? So how
Yes.
did you get from biology to esotericism, psychology, theosophy? How did that movement occur?
Mhm. Yes, I was always interested in spirituality since I was quite young. And then when I had to choose something to study in college, I was wondering or I was hesitating between philosophy and science, but I figured that I could study philosophy on my own and not science. So I did my degrees in microbiology. I was always interested in the genetics, the DNA, and all of that. So when I was in my second year in college, I came to the TS, and this was something that was always with me. So to me, it was not difficult to combine science and spirituality. It's the way that I have always thought.
Along in the same lines as Blavatsky did when she sought to combine uh, theosophy and science and spirituality. So, have you found that your background in biology, that your degree has helped you at all in these studies, the understanding of the esoteric and theosophy?
Mm. I suppose. I mean, people sometimes ask me that question, and I guess it helped me look at things in a particular way, in a way that it tries to be systematic and to the facts and things like that. My overall scientific, formation, let's say. But I mean, I when I got to the TS, it was what I had always been looking for, as you mentioned, to combine study, religion, philosophy, and science. But then I always say that the theosophy killed my love for science because when I started looking at this far greater perspective that theosophy offers, then science began to look as a very little part of the cosmos and the least important of all for me. So I don't necessarily, although I stay informed about the what happens in science and all of that, I don't know that my understanding of science really contributed much to my spiritual life. I think we don't necessarily need science for the spiritual life. Of course, other people feel different. Perhaps because I know science, I have that sense that it's not important. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it influenced much my view. But that may be not true. Many times we are not really aware of how things affect us.
Yes, I was thinking that maybe it gave you a way to structure things. It gave you a pragmatic approach. It
Mhm.
kept your feet on the ground. It helped you be organized. It helped you learn how to study, and it
Mhm.
helped to open your mind. So it may have formed a foundation that you don't exactly realize every day as you are studying and learning and teaching.
Yeah.
But I bet it did have a background. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. If anything, it would be more in that aspect on how to approach things rather than the scientific knowledge itself. So yes.
okay. And so you went from Argentina to Adyar, and then you went to Adyar to Wheaton. Is it,
Correct.
and how long were you there?
I was in Wheaton for 9 years. So
Nice.
originally they invited me to be there for a year or so. They were organizing an international congress with the three Americas. So they needed people who spoke Spanish and English to help with the organization. So that's how I came, and then eventually I started working at Olcott in Wheaton, being part of the staff. And then in 2016, my wife Michelle and I moved here to Crotona, where I live.
You moved there when?
In 2016 to Crotona, from Wheaton to Crotona.
16?
Mhm,
9 years ago?
mhm.
Oh my gosh. You seem like you just moved.
I know, time passes. So I was 9 years in Wheaton, and I've been 9 years here in Crotona.
Okay, I thought maybe I misheard you or something because it seems like it was just yesterday you moved. Oh goodness. Oh
Mm.
goodness. Well, were you raised in a religion?
Yes, in Argentina, especially when I was growing up, like 90% of people are Catholics. So I grew up as a Catholic. I went to church, to communion, the confirmation, all of that. Even I was quite active in the youth group. Um, but somehow I always it's similar to the question with science. I always looked at the Christian teachings in a broader sense than how they would regard it. So I always believed in reincarnation. I don't know when was the first time that I heard about that, but I remember I just thought, okay, Jesus didn't talk about this, but of course reincarnation exists. That was my position, and I always had a spiritual bent. So I was happy being part of the youth group, and that was my spiritual path until eventually I started to need deeper answers than what the Orthodox Christianity can give you.
Were you raised in a family that allowed that? Were you able to voice that and talk about your doubts with your family, or did they shut you down?
Yeah, no, no, no. My mom is religious, not very orthodox, and my dad is not religious in particular. My mom's sister, my aunt, she was a nun that was very proactive in service. She lived in slums with poor people. She lived in the north or the south of the country with indigenous people. They were really active, helping people. And I always had a great. She passed away a few years ago. She was my godmother. I always had a great relationship with her, but she was also open-minded. She would do yoga and Reiki, for example. So I never really had an experience of Christianity or Catholicism in particular, being Orthodox. So yes, in my house, it was okay to believe whatever you wanted to.
Well, yeah, an Argentinian nun doing Reiki, that's pretty open-minded. Well, so tell us a little, we've alluded to it, but tell us a little about your spiritual search that led you to where you are today.
Yeah. Um, I guess if I go all the way back, when we moved, I was born in Buenos Aires, as I said, and when I was 8, and my mom had her third child, Buenos Aires was too big, the commute was very long, so My parents decided to move to a smaller city. That is where I grew up. But then I was 8 years old, and this small city, I didn't have friends. The TV would start at 6 p.m. I was really bored. I would go in the morning to school and then have nothing to do. And my grandpa, my dad's dad, started sending me books to read, like the classical books, Jules Verne's and Stevenson and all the classical literature. So I developed a love for reading. But then
And
after
you were how old when you were reading these books?
8 or 9,
Wow.
yeah, and then after a couple of years, I started feeling, what's the point in reading these books? The book is finished. I start another one, but what is left? I felt like I was wasting my time. So then I started looking for something that had more meaning. Maybe when I was around 10, I guess. And my dad had some books about Atlantis, about the pyramids, about the mysteries of the world. So I started reading those things, and that's what took my mind in that direction. Then, when I was a teenager, I would read some of New Age books. My mom would buy some New Age books or some Chopra or things like that. And then I would read the books that she bought. But all these cases, I always felt that the concepts were very superficial. I was looking for something deeper. After reading a couple of books, I would feel again, okay, I know this, I understand this, what is left. I mean, I felt that wasn't. So I guess when I was 20, I wanted to learn how to meditate. So I bought a couple of books, but it was really difficult. And my mom was going to yoga at the time. So talking to her about this, that I wanted to see if there was a group that I could learn how to meditate. Because her yoga teacher was a TS member or had been a TS member. I don't know if he was at the time. She knew about the TS. I think she had gone to for one lecture once. So she said, "Oh, there is an organization. I'll take you there and let's see what they do." So she took me to the TS lodge in this small city. They were giving a class on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and meditation and all that. So it was perfect. And I really fell in love with the library. When I saw that library with all these books on all the subjects that I wanted to read, I said, this is home. No matter what classes I would give, the library was enough. So that's how I came to the TS, and my mom was, an important part of it.
Wow, that's neat. Well, not many people have that opportunity that it started in the generation before, even though a lot of theosophists have. So it sounds like you had a very good foundation to move into the next phase of your life.
Mhm.
Did you have any living teachers that helped you along your path?
No, not really. I mean, beyond the different TS members from whom I drew inspiration and I learned, when I joined the TS, I was 20, 21. Then I joined, there was a wonderful youth group with whom we grew together learning about this. And that was very meaningful in my life. I would say that the youth group and the activity, it was very serious. We would get together during long weekends, travel to a city from different parts of the country, get there, stay in the library of the TS until 2 a.m. reading The Secret Doctrine, eating pizza, and it was really serious. And that was a very important aspect of my spiritual life. And then, of course, I learned from older members and things like that, but I didn't have a mentor in particular or somebody you could consider in that way.
Well, so it sounds like the fundamental concepts and principles of theosophy are the things that really mentored you. It was an inner search. It,
Yes, yes,
yes, it was.
yes. I remember, like, around that time that I started reading, I would wake up, and I would wake up really sad and with the sense of, why am I waking up? What's the point of this? So I think since I was a kid, I always had the sense of just normal life being not enough, being superficial, being not satisfactory. And I think that's what fueled my search into, okay, there has to be something more.
That has to be something more. I think a lot of people start with that. Well, so in the process, you became a speaker and an author. Maybe you could tell us about the two books and about your publishing company.
Yeah. I've been always interested in education. So even when I was in high school, I was part of a society, a medical society that would teach us about sexual education, for example, and then we would go with them and we would teach about sexual education to our peers because they had this program where they said that teenagers would learn better from other teenagers than from adults. And then in college also I work helping the teachers and taking care of some of the laboratory activities. So I always liked education. So naturally, when I came to the TS, there was not a youth group in the city where I was. I mean, there was a youth group around the country. So I thought, okay, let's form a youth group here, and for that I had to start giving lectures. So I started taking a book just like you do in college. I gave a talk on karma. I borrowed 4 or 5 books on karma, read them, summarized them, and then my lecture was basically what I learned from those books. But because I was used to teaching, I guess the lectures were good enough. But I found that I really enjoyed that. So from the early, my during my first year in the TS, I started giving lectures. Also because I was part of a small lodge, so they saw a young person that was going to college, and that I would advertise the lectures in the university. So eventually, a group of young people were attracted. We formed the youth group, and then that's how I started with lecturing. And then writing, it was before I left Argentina. I was helping with in the publishing house. I would proofread books and things like that. And then an older member who was quite knowledgeable, and he was in charge of the publishing house. He wanted to publish a book on the 7 principles. And I read the book, and I didn't think that that was a good book on the 7 principles. So I told him, I don't think we have to spend money on this book. This guy is saying things that I don't agree, that this is not what I see in theosophical literature. He was a theosophist, the author, but so he told me, okay, why don't you write a book on the 7 principles? Write it, and that's what gave me, okay, I'll see if I can write a small book on the 7 principles, and eventually I did. It is published in Spanish. It's called The 7 Dimensions of Self, or of the Self, and that's how I start. I mean, before I had written articles because in the youth group we had our own magazine, so we all wrote articles for our magazine and all that. But I guess that's how I started going into writing. Then later here in the US, I started giving lectures, and people would always tell me, "Do you have a book? Do you have a book?" And I would say, "No, I don't have time to write a book." But eventually, I started trying to organize my day to be able to write at least an hour in the morning every day before going to work. And that's how and then Michelle, my wife, because the quest in Wheaton was in the process of closing. So Michelle said, okay, let us create a publishing house ourselves. And she did. I mean, she can do whatever she puts her mind to. She had no idea of publishing or companies or anything, but she was a PE teacher, but she's very able. So she created a company, and we started publishing our books.
Well, tell us now the first book. What was the title of the first book?
So the first book in English, the title is The Evolution of the Higher Consciousness. And that's because there is a series of writings from Blavatsky that are called the esoteric instructions that she gave to serious students of the TS. And in the esoteric instructions, she says, before we deal with the higher consciousness, we have to understand the lower consciousness. And she develops a lot of teachings in connection to the lower principles. But then she died before she could go into the higher principles. So I said, okay, let me see what she wrote about the higher consciousness throughout her writings and collect them and see what we can learn about this, since she didn't have time to write about it in the esoteric instructions. So that's what I did. I started collecting all the information about the higher nature, the spiritual nature in human beings. And because Blavatsky is quite difficult to understand in general, I made comments and I would try to clarify the ideas and present them in an organized way. And that's the origin of the first book, Evolution of the Higher Consciousness, which is all based on Blavatsky's teachings. Then I started working on a book on the secret doctrine. It's called Approaching the Secret Doctrine, where again I try to clarify help understanding the teachings in the secret doctrine, but also how to study this book, because Blavatsky says the study itself of the secret doctrine is a form of yoga. So I try to present there what she means by that, and then another part connected to the practical aspect of the secret doctrine, how that knowledge can help us in our daily life. And then lately, we produced a couple of booklets. One is the practical teachings of Blavatsky, where I try to bring the information in her writings, similar to evolution, but now based on the practice. So there are things on study, meditation, service, on self-mastery, self-observation, purification, things like that. It's a pamphlet based on a lecture that I gave in England, one of the Blavatsky lectures that they organized. And then the last booklet that we just produced is called The World of Theosophy. That is, in question and answers, is an exploration of what is the TS, its objects, what we do in the TS, what is theosophy, for the new inquirers, people who come to our lodges and say, oh, this is interesting. Can you explain what this is? And, people who are inquiring. It's a small book so that it's not intimidating. It's in a non-technical language. And that's the latest that we produced.
So will they be able to buy all of these on your website?
Yes, on Fohat Productions website. If you the URL is fohatproductions.com, and then they will see the books.
Okay, and we'll put that link in the comments as well so
Right.
that people can purchase those. This booklet sounds wonderful for
Mhm.
newcomers. Super. Tell me what role you were talking about meditation was somehow how you started. What role has meditation played in your life?
Um, I think I think it's a very important part of the spiritual life. Not the only part. I know there are the monastic traditions like Buddhism, etc., tend to put a lot of emphasis on meditation. We should meditate several hours a day. What I see in the theosophical tradition is that there is not that approach. The approach is that meditation is very important, along with study and understanding life from a deeper perspective, along with service, and all of them need to balance each other. But meditation evidently is an important part in the process of in the inner journey to try to realize those things that we study in the books. So I I have had a regular practice of meditation, let's say, for most of my time as a theosophist, and I think that is, it's the special tool we have to explore higher states of consciousness in us, to see what is beyond thought, to see what is in deep silence and things like that. So obviously this was something uh, that I was searching for because it's what brought me to the TS. But I never looked at meditation as okay, I should be in my room meditating, 10 hours a day. I don't take it in that way.
Well, what about a lot of people travel and their schedules change? Um, are you able, do you meditate every day or do you go with the flow of what your life is going? For example, if you're traveling and you've got a lot of things and you don't have time, how do you work that? Some people
No, I,
really, they say I'm meditating every day and I do. And some people say, well, let's go with the flow. So,
yeah. No, I mean, I try to meditate every day, and then when I can't, I can't. So as you say, when I'm traveling, is difficult depending on the situation. But many times, you are traveling, you get to sleep in new places late. You have to get up early to give the talks, and if I don't have time to meditate, okay, I don't meditate. But um, other than things that prevent me from meditating, then I try to sit every day, basically. And of course, the practice fluctuates because sometimes we have more energy or less energy, or so the meditation is to me is a living practice in which there are periods in which certain atmosphere is created, other periods in which it is not. It doesn't matter, to me the practice is just sit there and do the best you can in this exploration. I tend not to follow. I mean, I have used throughout the years several methods recommended in theosophical literature, but I use them just as the starting point. And to me, meditation is, as I said, is the effort to reach a deeper state than we normally work. So I tend not to do mechanical things in meditation. So that requires creativity, and sometimes the mind is up to it, and sometimes it's not. But that's part of life.
oh, I like that. I like that. Well, this is sponsored by the Theosophical Order of Service. Could you tell us what role service has played in your life?
Mhm. Yes, I think service is the essential motivation. In the same way that that I felt, okay, what's the purpose of doing this? Even with the study of theosophy, if this was just for me, I would still feel that it's not enough, that there is something missing there. And that's why I guess from the beginning I always felt that the joy in theosophy for me was in sharing what I had discovered or understood or learned. So basically, everything that I do in my spiritual life is with an eye on uh, how can I share this with others and help others in their own path. Throughout the years, I have never been constantly involved in the TOS for different circumstances. There was no TOS group where I was in Argentina, and then my activity in the TS started going more in the direction of the education aspect. So if I had infinite time, I would be helping in the TOS, but I don't have that infinite time, so I chose to go through the education line. That is the one that I feel I can offer something. But I think that service is the essence of what we do. Whatever we do, and be it teaching or working more on physical plane projects or relating to other people, the the basic motivation behind is service, or has to be service. So I yeah, that would be that's the foundation of. And if you see, for example, the booklet that I wrote on the practice of HPV practical teachings, it starts with service. The first point is service. And I think that's how Blavatsky and the masters presented this. You do this because of service, not because you are trying to get to your own liberation.
Yeah, not to show your own colors, but
Mm-hmm.
to draw on a universal canvas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And changing a little bit, changing the topic a little bit, were there any favorite books? I mean, I know you studied The Secret Doctrine, and that may be your favorite book. Were there any favorite theosophical books that really were guideposts for you?
Yeah. Yes, it would be very hard for me to choose one book, but the emphasis has changed throughout my theosophical life. So when I first studied in the TS, the secret doctrine was what attracted me the most. I remember in one of my first meeting that they invited me to a lodge meeting, and they were studying the Mahatma letters. And in the conversation, they mentioned the secret doctrine. So after the meeting, I said, I want that book that you mentioned. I want to study that book, The Secret Doctrine. And they said, oh, no, that's very difficult. And they gave me At the Feet of the Master. I went back home, read it, in an hour because it's a small book. And I thought, well, this is what I learned in church. So next week I said, okay, I read it. Now give me the secret doctrine. And we had this youth group that there were several people who were studying the secret doctrine. There was a friend of ours was 17, and he was giving lectures on the secret doctrine in his lodge. So I learned a lot from them. But then gradually I started appreciating also Krishnamurti's teachings, because I saw in his teachings a way to bring into practice those things that we study. So for several years, I focused quite quite a bit on working on the lines of what Krishnamurti said, always working on other lines too. It's not that I would stop reading the Secret Doctrine or things like that. And then, of course, I began to appreciate At the Feet of the Master, not as an intellectual essay, but as an essay on how we should live. So At the Feet of the Master, The Voice of the Silence, Light on the Path. And then after that, I started realizing how valuable the books of Besant and Leadbeater are, especially in what is connected to the practice and meditation, because they talk about a lot about purification and self-control or self-mastery and meditation. So my focus has changed, but I never really abandoned what I was interested before. I just focus at different times on a particular aspect or the other. Here in the US, because we didn't have this book translated into Spanish, I discovered a book by Jeffrey Hodson, The Yogic Ascent to Spiritual Heights, a wonderful book. I mean, to me, it's a wonderful book, very practical. It's a kind of continuation of Blavatsky's esoteric teachings, I think. So that, the last few years, I've been working with that book too.
Well, I'm guessing that you are as well read as any contemporary theosophist. And I know that you also like to practically apply the principles of theosophy. So I'm going to ask you about a practical application. Do you think that your experience and your knowing of the theosophical principles have helped you in your personal relationships? And if so, how?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, since I grew up with theosophy, I can't really separate my growth from theosophy. I came to the TS when I was 20. So if I think of how I was before coming to the TS and how I am now, there is a big difference. But then, it's obvious that there will be a difference from a teenager and a person that is in his 50s. So I can't really separate. I don't know how I would be without theosophy, but my impression is that that I would be very different. I mean, what I learned in theosophy has been fundamental in who I am, and in all the path that is still ahead of me, and all the work that is still ahead of me. But yes, there is. I think of my teen years, and it feels like a different incarnation, because the concerns and the difficulties and things that the teenager had, are no longer here. Of course, that doesn't mean that I have plenty of things to work on, and you know to yeah, to grow. But yeah, it has been a fundamental of fundamental importance in my life.
Yes, yeah, that's great. You don't know who you were without that, so you can't
Yeah.
separate that out. I'm wondering, we, and this is something that I didn't let you know that I was going to ask, but we do live in a fractured world, and we have talked about that in our 150th anniversary of Theosophical Society. And I'm wondering if you had any advice today to give to our fellow theosophists about living in a fractured world and how to make that easier personally. What
Mhm.
kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, that's one of the areas, for example, in which the study of theosophy has helped me a lot, because let me let me go start all the way in with what Blavatsky said at one point. We really don't care what happens in politics, because whether you have a king or a president, or it's all the same for the inner life, from the point of view of the inner life. Now, she did engage in more activist causes. She had an orphanage for women. She helped, with Besant in different causes. So it's not that she was dismissing that, but what she was placing emphasis on is that our inner life is independent on what happens to the body. And she says, she gives the example of, I think it was Epictetus, that was a slave, and he was a slave and a philosopher. So he said a person could be in prison and still have been helping the world and have a deep spiritual life. And if you think of the monks that go and live in a cave, that's no different from prison, right? So to me, if we what theosophy helps me is to put things in perspective and realize what is eternal, what is the thing that is really important, as opposed to the things that happen on the physical plane that are constantly changing, that we are in constant cycles, going up, going down, going up, going down, that there are all these external influences that affect people, and of course they produce suffering, and we don't want people to suffer, but that suffering is also helping us grow. So my view of what is happening in the world is kind of, from that point of view. I mean, I am uh, I, I am distressed by the suffering that is in the world, but I try to look at it from that higher point of view, in which this is how we grow, and then while trying to help people in whatever area of action we have. In my case, is through the classes and the books. While trying to help people, I trust that what is going on, there is a plan behind. It's part of how we grow, and that we as souls are unfolding our potential, and that helps me deal with the world better.
Well, it sounds like maybe in terms of values clarification to decide what is real and what is not real and where we're going to put our focus and our emphasis. So
Yes, yes, it's refocusing our perspective, as you are saying. When our mind and our consciousness is absorbed by what happens on the physical plane, then this becomes like the only thing that exists. But when we shift that perspective and we try to see more of a more complete understanding of life, then things are seen in a different perspective, and that perspective itself brings some sense of confidence and hope and solace. Of course, in order to do that, we need to have assimilated to some degree the teachings, because there is a difference between somebody coming and telling us, oh, the physical plane is an illusion, the higher planes are the real. If that's just a concept to us, it's not going to help much. But if we have been working with this, throughout the years and trying to bring that perspective in our lives and trying to understand that in connection to our own being, then that becomes more of a reality for you. So then that phrase is not just, a theoretical sentence, but it's something that really brings some different state of consciousness, a different way of looking at this.
I think you're saying that it takes a while to develop that sense of equanimity and resilience
Yeah.
so that when we are met with these problems, we're already standing on solid ground. We're not trying to learn when we're being flipped around by the universe, that
Absolutely.
we are already standing in the truth.
Yeah, and that's why I think the study of our literature is so important, because that's the preparation for when the crisis come, whether it is in your personal life or in the life of the community. So this study is what, of course, if it is just intellectual and is you are accumulating information, it's not going to help much. But if we study in the way that Blavatsky and Besant and other theosophies propose, that it includes a real inner exploration and trying to apply that in your life, then that's what prepares us to actually perceive and act differently when the problem comes.
Thank you. And in the East, it's very familiar for people to have a guru in which they get a transmission, Shaktipat, some kind of an energy transfer. And I'm wondering if when we study theosophical principles, when we study source materials, do you think that it's more than the study? Do you think maybe there's some kind of transmission from the information itself?
Mhm. Yes, actually, Annie Besant talked about that, and she says that when we are studying a book, that book, the information there is connected to the person that is the author. And she says that when we study in a meditative way, in a deep way, we can actually uh, put ourselves in rapport with the mind of the author, and then we can derive far more information or more understanding from the book than what the words actually say. Because she says the words are like a synthesis or a summary of a whole understanding that the author has that cannot be put in words there. So when you are studying something, if you enter in rapport with that author, then you start getting the whole understanding. And in the case of the books that we have by these wonderful human beings like Blavatsky and Besant, Leadbeater and Hodgson and many others who were people who had a direct knowledge of the higher consciousness, then we can derive a lot of understanding that is not coming through the words. So definitely there is something like that.
That's beautiful, Pablo. And that also could be an incentive for people to study. They say, well, I study. And it's like, well, you're getting more from studying than you may think right off the bat. It's beautiful. I believe that there are words and principles and thoughts that want to come through on the human level. And those words and principles and thoughts, they choose the books that they're going to be written in, and they choose the people that are going to speak the words. And so that we're conduits for that higher purpose and those higher thoughts. And
Uh,
um,
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Pablo,
There
for
is
that.
a class that I did some time ago where I looked into particularly that point of view. And basically what we see in theosophical literature is that the concepts are connected to the eternal truths. So by contemplating the concept, but not just intellectually, but meditatively and trying to see what the implications are, you can actually tap into the eternal truth as a truth, not as a concept. And this is something that I found part of some of the philosophies that I like. Besides theosophy is Neoplatonism, and that's what, Plotinus and all of them would say. You start by contemplating a concept or even the beauty in the world or anything in the world. And then you can, with that contemplation can lead you to the source of that beauty or the source of that concept. Or so it's what you are saying. All this manifested aspect of the cosmos is always connected to the source, and we can access that source by contemplating the manifested aspect.
And maybe also when we speak with people, because I feel as you talking, Pablo, that I'm being lifted up as well. So that there's some people say, whenever two or more are together, gathered, that there is that mystical third. And I can feel that as you speak and talk about these concepts, which are beautiful. Thank you so very much. I'm wondering if there's anything that we haven't covered or anything, any advice or anything that you would like to say in closing.
Um, no, perhaps I see sometimes in people who are in the spiritual search, like two attitudes that I think if we can bring them together, we can be more effective in our inner work. Some people would just pay attention to the study, the understanding, the taking, let's say, theosophy or any other spiritual teaching as a philosophy, as a mental understanding. And then today we have a lot of people who take spirituality as a technology in the sense of a series of techniques. They don't know why, but they repeat this mantra, or they don't know why, but they breathe in this way, or do this or that. And to me, the study without practice is not fruitful, and the practice without understanding is not fruitful. I think we need to unite the two because, I mean, I'm not discovering anything. When the Buddha gave the Eightfold Noble Path, the first thing there is right view, which comes from the study, consideration, and reflection on all this. Without right view, your meditation or your practice is not going to lead you anywhere because you are doing it from the wrong perspective. For example, the perspective that you are the body or whatever. So I think we need to unite both. We need to be practical, but with a very strong understanding. And we need to acquire a very strong understanding, but then put it to practice. So that's what I've seen that has been helpful in my life.
There's an old saying, and that is, you must walk your walk. And I added to that, and I said, that's not totally the truth. You must walk your walk, but you must be saying the right things.
Mhm,
And that's what you're saying. If it's not connected, or if you have the wrong perspective, you're not going to see what you need to see.
mhm.
Well, thank you so very much, Pablo.
No, thank you. It has been very nice to be here. Thank you again for inviting me, and all the best to everybody that is watching these videos.
Thank you.